What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Spark to Fire. I'm your host, Landon Rhodes, and today I've got the founders of Apple Roofing with me. Guys, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity.
I'll go ahead and have you start off, Dustin. Go ahead and give us a quick intro of who you are, where you're from, and then we'll move over into Marcus.
Okay, yeah. So I grew up in western Nebraska. Dustan Biegler is my name. And while I was, growing up, Marcus and I were childhood friends, really. So grew up in western Nebraska, started a roofing company in McCook originally, and ended up growing it up to out here.
Was it the same? It was a different brand, right?
Yeah, yep.
Go ahead, Marcus.
Marcus Kuhlmann, also grew up in McCook, Nebraska. Dustin and I have been friends, obviously, like you said, since we were like 6 or 7. My aunt lived down the 3 houses down, so that's how we actually become friends, is running around as kids on the same block, right?
Yeah.
Got a wife named Celine, little boy named Breck, and 2011 we started our journey.
Yeah, and so before we get into the journey of what that was like, what were you guys like as kids? What was your childhood like? You look at your trouble, like both of you. I'm guessing you were troublemakers.
I always remember Marcus was a really good athlete. I can't help but think of like the dumb contests we used to have. I remember one time we would like put the chains on the swing set and keep raising them higher and higher and see who could keep jumping over it. You know what I mean? I don't even know if you remember that.
I don't remember that.
But I remember Marcus won and I didn't like it.
And how old were you at this point?
I think that was about when we were in maybe 3rd or 4th grade.
Yeah, we had to be like less than 10.
So competitive is a good way of describing that.
I would say so. Yep.
So what happened after high school? What did you guys do after that?
So, Marcus went off to, he originally was in college in McCook at the community college. I had worked construction throughout, high school, and I just continued to work construction. In the trade industry, how it kind of is, as soon as you turn 18, your boss looks at you and says, "Congratulations, you own your own company." Nobody wants an employee. So that's kind of, a little bit of how I got, into that entrepreneurial as I was pushed into it by him. So, yeah, it was a kind of a good thing. And I also was like, oh, what am I doing?
Pushed into becoming 1099.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so what about you?
Well, okay, I'm going to try to shorten this up as fast as I can. But the funny thing about that is so Dustin has a younger brother that I was really good friends with too. So it was like the 3 of us, right? So I had outside of high school is kind of, they were homeschooled. I went to public school, right? So we did our thing up until like 10 or 12, and then we kind of went our own ways. And about 17, probably 16 maybe, we all kind of come back together, started to come back together. And then the fun life part of life, maybe I moved out, we had apartment, he had a little house right down the street. So we went through those little episodes of life. And
what he's trying to say is Marcus had the fun house.
yeah, we got it. We did our fair share of partying.
You partied every now and then, maybe?
We partied a lot. Bit. So, but the funny thing is, I worked construction at the time, and long story, but I went in, then from there got my degree, went to ABC Supply selling roofing siding materials, then to Simpson Strong Tie selling chemical mechanical anchors. And Dustin called me up and said, why don't you move back to Nebraska? But the funny thing about all of that is the thing that nobody knows is when I was going to college, Dustin and I started a mowing company.
Oh,
so we actually are business partners before this. And we owned this little mowing company that we were around behind Kearney. There's a place called Grandpa's Steakhouse, and behind there's a bunch of houses back there.
Yeah.
And we had, 10 or 11, 12. So Dustin was the investor. I was the mower, I went to school. I went and mowed. And that's when Dustin ended up moving up to Kearney, and then we lived together. And his younger brother was selling for him in his very first roofing company. And that was kind of what started that path. And then I left and came back. So it was kind of a full circle plan.
Interesting. So you've been working together in some form or capacity for quite a while then.
Well, pretty much since we were like 19 20.
19.
I was 19 or 20.
Well, I mean,
so.
even before we did that, I mean, when I was in McCook, Marcus had come and helped on a few tear-offs, you know. So he was helping on the roofing side long before he was even out of school.
Yeah. And, you went more of the corporate route, getting a job for a larger company, right? So what kind of drew you into the thought process of working in more of an entrepreneurial venture?
I mean, I don't know. Dustin probably could convey this better, but I think I was pretty much always entrepreneurially minded, I would say. Like,
very analytical, very questioning.
Yeah.
Always looking for a better way, very efficiency, I mean, even when we had the mowing company, I didn't have like much computer experience or anything. And, I came down, everything for me was like very, very simple, right? I come down, Marcus is like pulling up his Excel spreadsheet. Okay, here's all our accounts. He had them all coded. This is their bills, like blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. I mean,
look at all those. Look at all those lawns. That's great. So go ahead. You're going to say
well,
something.
so I think that, just going into corporate America I was rookie of the year for ABC. And so I had seen some success there. And then I went to Simpson and I'd done fairly well there. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, like, here I am working in corporate America, and I knew nobody when I moved to Chicago, and I was becoming, what I felt at the time was successful, right? And I'm like, why couldn't I just do this for my friend? Like, my friend's running a roofing company. He's asked me to come. Why don't I just help him grow? Like, why am I helping like this multi-$100 million company, billion-dollar company grow? Why don't I just go help my friend become more successful, right? And that's what kind of made me. And then he was obviously pressuring me to come back, but
right. Yeah, which good sell. Good job.
Yeah.
You nailed that. So when you guys got started, what was it like? Take me back to the first days of Apple Roofing. I want to know what that was like when you came back to join him. What was that like?
Okay, so it happened very, very quickly. This is 2011, September of 2011. I had a roofing company. Marcus was working for us, and I also took on a business partner back in, I think, 2003 or 4. And, throughout, the years, the business partner and I were a little bit different, as far as the way we wanted to operate the company and the way that we saw things, I guess, morally, and Marcus and him, were having a disagreement about his pay, and I did side with Marcus, and we decided that we were just different enough that we would split ways, and so we did. And I thought, hey, Marcus, you know what? We're splitting up. Like, I've already seen how valuable he was. He had so many things that he brought, to our former company. So we wanted to be partners right off the bat, and we were. And so we really were in the middle of working in McCook actually that year. So we had like all these people we knew very personally that we were working with. So, that happened, and it was like 3 days, that we basically turned around from, kind of a bad breakup in business, right? And had to get everything together, right? To service the clients that we had, right?
A new company.
Correct. So, I mean, we were out there like, oh my gosh, we need trucks, we need a name, we need, contracts, we need all of these things, and we need it fast. So, like, we were scrambling really, for the first, we put it together very, very quickly. It was definitely do mode.
Yeah.
And what was that like for you? So coming from, because I know what it's like to come from a stable working environment where there's processes, procedures for everything. There's people in line to train you. I mean, that's corporate America, right? There's a lot of everything's kind of already in place for you. So what was it like going from, a Simpson and ABC Supply to having to create everything from scratch?
Well, it's like spark the fire, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
is that, so that was it? That was the moment. You probably love that though, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was probably just a matter of time, right? It was a matter of time before I was going to go on my own.
Go do something.
Yeah. And Dustin, I think, recognized that. He's like, we just need to do this together, right? Mm-hmm. And we had talked so many times. I mean, hell, we were living together.
Yeah.
We lived together.
So you knew all the shit he was dealing with
oh yeah,
his day-to-day life.
I knew everything about the whole side of the business,
right?
His side of the business, everything, right? And then I had my my distributor side, and then Simpson Strong side was a manufacturer. So I went through every phase of it. So I'm sitting here with these thoughts in my head, watching Dustin every facet of the business because we lived together. You know, we talked about everything.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the funny thing is it all comes back to our hometown, right? We all reunite in the hailstorm that started us off of this thing. And I mean, at that point, it was just go. Money didn't matter. That didn't matter at that time. It was just go. These are widgets, and we got to take care of them. Right. You know, we had, I don't know, at least 30 single family homes sold, and Highland Park was sold.
Right.
It was like $700,000 at the time that we were moving over. Like that.
And in what time frame now?
Like tomorrow.
But so you're talking
like
there was a hailstorm that happened, and you had the opportunity to close that amount of business.
Yeah, they were our customers already.
Oh, they were. Okay.
Yeah, it was basically who are we taking and who's staying, right? Like who's this company's customer, who's this company's customer. So it was literally like, go get new contract signed, go do this. I mean, it was literally just go.
Right.
So we didn't really have time to think about it.
But how long did it take you to build up to that point? Because you didn't just wake up yesterday, you know, you didn't wake up overnight and have $700,000 worth of potential business or even business in general.
Well,
so,
we really did, because when we split the company, you know, my ex-partner and I basically kind of agreed, like, you don't know any of these people.
who said that? He said that about you?
No, I was saying that to him, right?
Got it.
And like, you don't know him. I've got personal relationships with him, or Marcus has personal relationships with him, or Brian. Brian also, Kincaid came with us. He was also from McCook. So, you know, it was really us three that were, you know, the beginning of Apple Roofing. And, you know, so we started with these customers because it was a part of the breakup, right?
Got it.
But I mean,
We're very, like Marcus and I, that's probably one of the biggest differences between us. And, you know, my ex-partner is we're so relationship focused.
yeah.
That's why we, you know, wanted to make sure that it happened that way, because I mean, relationships will take you like so much further, you know, getting along with people, treating people right, you know, and that's where our differences were. And we wanted to make sure that that went good, you know?
Yeah. It's crazy when I see people, you know, in business, you're going to run into people that will put one singular deal above a relationship, and they'll actually burn the relationship, or quote, burn the bridge, right? Over one small deal. And small could be even hundreds of thousands of dollars in the scale of what you're talking about. And you have no idea what that person could have done with you and for you, and vice versa, but you would never know because you burned the relationship up.
Right.
And so I'm really cognizant of that, especially especially when it comes to like getting in business with friends. Is if you're going to do business with people and you're like, oh man, I really want to get this contract at this value, and for some reason it falls through, or they go with your competitor, you literally could work with them in 5 years, and it could be for a way huge, like larger ticket value. And I think that's what I've really spent a lot of time thinking about, that even the last year, is relationships over, you know, people over profit sort of situation, and the profit usually takes care of itself. But
Yeah.
so you got rolling, right? You said you were in do mode.
Yeah.
3 days, build a company.
Yeah.
And so how did the name Apple Roofing come about?
I'll let him tell the story.
Yeah.
Okay, so we obviously we have the conversation, you know, hey, well, what are we going to call this company, right? And so, you know, with our background, you know, one of the things that Marcus wanted was, he said, well, I want the color to be green. Okay, that was a big thing for him.
Why?
When I was in Chicago, I was in a thing that was called, I can't even remember the name. It's like Green Star Restoration or Green Star Construction. And we come up with the fact that was like during the green initiatives, the cool roof initiatives. Like green was like the recycle thing. You know? It was like the number one thing Googled at the time, or, you know, so that's why my head was in green.
Green living, green community, all that stuff, especially in Chicago.
It was just,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So you saw that coming. That's, by the way, it's trend spotting. Okay. Yeah. So you're looking at a trend. You're watching this happen in Chicago. You're like, we should apply this.
Yeah.
And it's subtle, but it's a real thing.
Yeah.
So green. And
And so really my thing, I said, is, hey, I want whatever the name is, I want to make sure that people can remember it, right? I remembered my old company. People would always be like, "Oh yeah, you did my roof." I can't remember the name of your company, but you're my roofing guy, you know, right? I was always a roofing guy, and I liked that, but I also thought, you know, if somebody's going to call me back that, you know, wants to call me back, if, you know, I tried to make sure they'd store my number personally and say my roofer guy, because they couldn't remember my company name. Yeah. It was so unmemorable, right? So that was my big thing, is whatever it is, it's got to be memorable, like easy to remember. And so Marcus and I literally, you know, had these kind of 2 guidelines and wrote down probably 200 names, you know, and we're sitting here in front of the computer. Marcus is typing and I'm looking around the room going, you know, just anything I saw, I'd say it right. Stick.
Brick.
Yeah.
Literally.
And I looked to the side of, you know, where we were sitting, and I saw my phone and I said, Apple. And, you know, he wrote it down, 1 of 200, right?
1 of 200.
Yeah. And when we go to narrow it down, I mean, we had like, I can't remember. We narrowed it down to like 5 names, and then 2. And then we decided, hey, you know what? It's got the green. It's easy to remember.
Do you remember
it's an object.
The second one? Do you remember the one that you didn't go with? Like the
Revolutionary roofing.
Okay.
I think is what it was. That's what I remember.
I think so. And we didn't. And we felt like it was more of an adjective, right? I actually think like a noun, right, is easier to remember, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, think about like Nike, Target, right? They have like Target especially. You remember the dog? Have you on the commercial?
Absolutely.
They didn't have to say Target, right? You knew it was a Target commercial. So we knew that whatever symbol we did needed to be symbolic of our name. Mm-hmm. Well, if you look up the A, what is Apple? It's Apple Roofing, right? Like, I mean, in Lincoln, we can pretty much brand that now, right? You can just put the A up and people know, oh, that's Apple Roofing.
100%. Yeah, and the green signs are all around. I don't even know if they say Apple, really. I mean, if they do, it's very small text, but the A is always big, right?
Well, that was kind of Marcus's always goal, is I want to be able to get rid of where it says Apple Roofing and just have the A and people to know what that means, right? That means you're branded. Mm-hmm. And I think that started to happen. You know,
for sure, in different regions, right? Like definitely in Lincoln, I think we could probably drop it and it would be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's great. So when you got your name, you continue to grow. What was it like growing from 700,000, 1 million in top line to where you are today? Like what are some of the worst failures you guys had as you were kind of crawling up the ladder there?
Well, I guess I would probably say that Marcus always had like the dream that, we should have like a CRM, right? And it was pretty uncommon for a roofing company to have a CRM, or, very few did at that time. Mm-hmm. And, we tried several of them out. We'd research them. Oh yeah, this seems like it's going to do everything we want. And then we'd find out, oh, this thing's not like convenient. It's very clunky, It's so much so that maybe people weren't using it, and then we're like, well, if we're not using it, it's not valuable.
Why are we paying for
it? Right? Yeah. Like, so we kept going down that road until we found one that we liked, and then I think that, I think one of the hurdles that comes in any business is when you're growing, there's certain like. I guess I would say barriers that you run into at different sizes of revenue, right? Like your problems are going to be different when you're doing, $1 million versus, even 7. When we look back, we talk about what are those barriers in the roofing industry, right?
So you would talk about them preemptively. So like when we get to a $10 million top line, we're going to run into this problem.
Well, we would try.
Yeah, we thought we
were.
Or
just the next foreseeable
issue.
Well,
we would always ask other people that, were in larger roofing companies than ours. We'd say, where's the barriers, right? What are the next barriers? Like when we were doing like 3 million, I remember asking a guy like, hey, what's the next barrier? Is it 5? Is it 10? Like where do you think that is, And we'd get different feedback, I think, from everybody, but till you really get there, you don't really understand what those barriers are going to be, I think.
And they're different on a cultural basis too.
Yeah.
Because your dynamics are different than any other company. So you would actively, and this is a really good point for the audience to remember, is to actively reach out to people that are in your industry and, learn from their mistakes. I think you were probably even a little bit surprised yourself as to the willingness of these people to talk to you about the problems they had at certain barriers, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, people that are usually like very successful actually get to the point where they don't like view people as like competitors anymore, as they get like, you know what, if I can help somebody else out, like they're not worried about it, right? Like you get, when you're smaller, you are super competitive. You have to be, right? You don't want to share anything necessarily, maybe you don't want to look vulnerable by even asking questions of people. I think we got past that, right? But I think as you grow in size and revenue, you get kind of past that, like, not saying you're not competitive still, but you're not like worried about sharing, right? Like, I actually think that the more companies that, operate like on a high standard, that we're all going to be better off,
Oh yeah.
It's not going to hurt anybody,
because there's a contractor or 100 out there that are doing things really like shabby work, and they're not being truthful with your customer, not being transparent that way. And if as much of that as you can avoid and you can like eliminate in the city, the better. Yeah,
I think that's one of the things in, I would say, even roofing more than any other trade in construction. There's a bit of a stigma that goes with, maybe a stereotype of what's a roofing company perceived as in a consumer's mind, right? And I think we've kind of thought, hey, we want to change that. And that's where we've really thought about when we make decisions in the company, is, hey, is this going to help change that?
Right. Yeah. You're looking at that as kind of your core values is, having a brand that's humanized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you can go almost give away everything, and nobody's going to like jump on it. Right.
Right.
I mean, they might take like less than 1% of what you tell them, because they're either trying to keep it all up here or they're writing it down, but they don't go act on it. Right.
Right.
And that took us a while to figure out, because we thought we had special, we were special. We're growing so fast,
right?
But we've come to realize that actually we get as much feedback from people as we can give to people, right?
Right.
By just being good professionals.
Yeah, because I know I was even in your office the other day, and you guys were reaching out to it was a firm out in is it Dallas or somewhere, like maybe it was Houston. Yep. You're talking to that guy in your conference room, and I was on the end there for a few seconds, but just talking about like, hey, what things are you running into? What's the market like since COVID, or what are you guys doing to continue with sales since you can't touch the customer anymore, and that sort of thing. I mean, that's really what it takes to scale. Wouldn't you say? Like to really like get ready to scale is to not be afraid to ask those questions.
Yeah, I think you have to, put your pride aside and know that you don't know it all, and be really open to learning. And more than anything, I think, you've got to continue to change all the time. I mean, this is probably a perfect example of, some of the biggest companies in the world right now are going bankrupt, right? So when you look at who's going to survive, I think it's the people that can change, just because you're big or strong or whatever as a company. You need to be able to change or you can't survive. I think there's a saying, I don't know who says it. I can't give credit to the right person, but they say something about when you're finished changing, you're finished, right? And I think there's a lot of truth, behind that is, the market, especially I think today, is always changing. What people expect is changing. What people are offering is changing. I think we've always tried to look towards not who's buying our product today, but like what's the future customer want, right? So don't think about how things are delivered today. How could they be delivered, right? I think Marcus always says like convenience is king, right? Amen. And how can we make it more convenient to the customer? Don't think inside the box of what we do today, right? We got to continue to look outside of that and strive towards what our future customer wants, not our present.
Yeah. And what what causes you to, what do you do to continue to innovate? Like, I know you'd probably, you look and you watch what other people are doing, but just like the thing in Chicago, right? You saw that the green initiative was happening. You saw that companies that were successful were probably like naming themselves green, that whole naming process. What are you doing to spot trends? What are you doing to stay ahead of your competitors specifically?
So I think one thing that we do that I think helps, we're big believers that we got to stay on top of the curve, or try to stay on top of the curve, right? Like we're ever changing. If we stop changing, I think, to tag on what Dustin was saying, if you're not growing, you're dying. And one of our things is we constantly change, like every year. Like we just did a revamp, and I showed you a little bit of our KPIs and the new things that we put in place this year. But some of those things that benefit, we're going to conferences, right? We're going to the International Roofing Expos. We belong to other communities of, like, we belong to a program or a company called ECA that is a group of roofers, just trying to stay on top of best practices. What can we offer to customers that nobody else? How do we product differentiate ourselves? How do we, what is that cool new gadget? Is it affordable? Can we try it? Does it make our processes more efficient? And always thinking about, like, our sales reps, like, what can we do to make their lives easier? You got a killer sales rep, he ends up running out of time. It's not that he can't sell more, he runs out of time. So how do we make his time more efficient? How do we allow him to get to more widgets, right? Like, whether it's a shed or whether it's a $200,000 roof, right? It's all a widget. If we take care of everybody the same way, that referral lead source is going to be through the roof, right?
Yeah, pun intended.
Pun intended.
Right. So taking care of people, making sure that you're staying in front of, like, conferences, you're making sure your industry, or your industry's conferences. That's something that I know I need to get better at too as a business owner. Is I do a lot of things for my own personal development that are, like, entrepreneurial based, but not specific to, I would say, the advertising world. And which is really interesting because I always try and figure out ways to stand out as well. Like there might be a conference on podcasting, but you didn't need to go to a conference on podcasting to build a studio and understand that podcasts are important, right?
Right.
So I try and find the happy medium between that of and how much time do you guys spend on developing yourselves? I know clearly you do, because I can tell just by getting to know you guys a little bit better. But how much time do you actually spend, in a given month on personal development, that sort of thing?
Well, for me, I would say I'm either spending time on personal development or, company development, right? Like, that's really in my role. And, on a personal level, I found that if I'm not working on my personal development, like, you'll burn out, right? Like, if you're not seeing, like, the advancement of how you're getting better as a person or more valuable to the company or the client, then your purpose is kind of like, what am I doing, right?
Right.
And sometimes I can look back in the past and look at times where I'm like, God, like, how do I get out of the funk? You know what I mean? And then, like, I can remember there was a time I think I was in the airport and I picked up a book, started reading it, and I was like, God, I feel kind of, like, passionate again, right?
Right.
And that's so, like, finding those things that, like, get you back in it. But, like, I think always keeping your mind engaged through maybe a book or whatever else, right, is my way anyway. That's worked for me to, like, make sure I'm staying engaged, and it does help you, like, think about things correctly, right? Or think in ways that maybe you would have never, put a different spin on things. I mean, a lot of the conferences we go to, I'm like, I disagree with about 90% of that, but I really like this 10, right? Like, I grabbed a great idea, So.
And how does that feel to disagree? I mean, because you're having success in the face of disagreeing with 90% of what the person's saying. And what, like, how does that feel, like, when you're, and obviously, like, I'm not setting you up to brag about yourself here. I'm just saying, like, I want to know, what is that like to have that sort of foresight?
Well, I think partially I want to answer that by saying that there's no one right way of doing business, right? Like, we can do it one way and it works really well, and somebody else can do it another way and it works really well, right?
Yeah.
Like we have our reasons for doing it that way and they have theirs. And doesn't make one right and one wrong. It's just two different approaches,
Just
right?
not how you would do it.
I think that there's some really good principles, right, that you want to guide your company by, you know, that work for everybody,
Yeah.
right? Like everybody knows the more valuable or value you can deliver to your customer, like, you know, it's going to equal success, right? Like, because word of mouth is the biggest thing, you know? So I think that as long as you have like your core principles down, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as like having a foresight of saying I disagree with something, I don't know. I just probably look at it like that works for somebody else. It would work in ours.
But it goes back to what you said earlier too. Like, are you a relationship builder or do you not care about the relationship?
Is it widgets and widgets only, or is it widgets and relationships?
Right. Or is it just dollars?
Or is it straight dollars?
I mean, if you're just talking about dollars, there's a whole business plan on just about dollars, right? We can supplement everybody for this and get nail pops out of the drywall from dropping shingles on because that was a consequential damage. I don't know.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's a method of their madness, right?
Right. That's a great way of putting it.
We
Their
have
madness.
our own. I mean,
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant was one of the best basketball players ever, right?
Right.
But he talked to Michael Jordan. He didn't go talk to the worst basketball player in the NBA. He went to one of the best basketball players in the NBA. Right. And I feel like that's what we try to do, is we try to align ourselves with like-minded professionals to come up with new ideas and things that maybe they've already tried. And we'll just take their word for it. It doesn't work, it don't work. Like, I don't need to go try it to figure it out if it works.
Right.
You know? But it's not going to stop us from growing because nobody can be me, nobody can be Dustin.
Right.
So I can tell you whatever I want to tell you, and you're not me.
Exactly.
You're not Dustin, you know?
You don't have my life experiences. You don't have our work ethic, most
Yeah.
likely. And you don't have my passion for this specific thing. Like if you were going to go tell me to build a roofing company tomorrow, I wouldn't have near the passion you guys have it.
Right.
Or the expertise or anything else, systems, et cetera. One of my favorite quotes, and I've probably said this before to our listeners, so I sound like a broken record, but this is one of my favorite quotes of all time from Jeff Bezos. He says, my competitors can't put me out of business, but my customers can. My competitors can't put me out of business, but my customers can.
I like that.
Because it's a customer obsession based way of doing business, which is, I think, what you guys have done is really put in the groundwork to understand how do we improve customer experience and in the process try and improve the roofing industry as a whole.
Right.
And then the byproduct of that is going to be high referral rate.
Right. I mean, even when you talk about like, you know, one of our culture things or core principles, right, is like providing value to the customer and also our employees. Okay. Those are like the two big things in our company is we want to make sure we're providing as much value to both of those. And, you know, if we can bring more value to a customer by helping another roofing company do things right, then hey, there's nothing wrong with that either. You know, it's still our mission. And I really, not saying that I know how right now, but if you can continue that mission to bring value, usually the money just follows. Like we don't talk about the dollars all the time. Like we talk about, you know, what we're trying to accomplish, not like, oh, this makes sense because you're going to make $1 zillion, right?
No.
I mean,
it has to feel good from a customer service perspective.
Right. And an employee perspective, right? Like we want to make sure that like every employee that comes in our business is like gaining life skills, gaining professional skills, you know, bettering themselves, getting in a better position, right? Like it's just important. I mean, without happy employees, you're not going to have happy customers, you know?
Yeah.
We're big on our employees. That's a big thing for us.
What do you guys do so when I asked Joey Hausman this, he had a great answer. And I thought this was really interesting. I'm sure it's very similar to where you guys are at, but I'm curious. He said, I asked him like, so how do you get to a point where your business is literally taking care of itself, like it's growing on its own, to the point to where, you know, you're going into work and there's your processes are so rock solid and your people are so rock solid that you just really like, your stress level about the whole thought process around it goes down. And he said, he's just like, we hired studs at the very beginning. And basically I'll summarize this, but he said, studs don't let not studs basically come into the doors. Like they don't allow people that aren't up to their level to even get in. So if you make them in charge of recruitment, you're not going to get subpar people because they're just going to weed them out. They're gone. And if they make it through the filter, they'll get fired, or they'll find their way out of the business. And he said, I think that's what he said. He's like, the interesting thing is that the people that thought they needed, that thought that we needed them more than the other way around, they found their way out of the business pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I think that is a universal truth that I've seen about like business and hiring. But what do you guys do to build culture and then retain awesome talent? Because you do have really cool people. I've met quite a few of them. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, first off, I think the most important thing is that you treat your employees like they're human capital and not human labor. So if I'm going to be the guy that's running around yelling and screaming at everybody, it's only a matter of time before they're just like, dude, this guy's a joke. Like,
take a hike.
Yeah, like this isn't even fun, right?
Right.
So I think that they have to understand that you appreciate them, right? Secondly, there's like 4 categories that you can really improve somebody's life, in my opinion. Number 1, spiritually, and we can't really control that. That's upon you, right? The next one's financial freedom. So what can we do to help you get to your financial goals and successes? What knowledge can we bring to you so that you feel like, whether it's reading a book or listening to a podcast, what knowledge can we bring to you that makes you feel like you're growing in your own personal life? And then there's the corporate or financial, career mode, right? Mm-hmm. So does it look like there's a vision that there's a path for me in this company? Mm-hmm. Or is my shelf life or my employee expectation X?
And is it maxed out?
Right. So what can I do in this company? Is there future growth? Are they a growing company? Are they trying to progress as a company?
Yeah.
Those things are like crucial to, I think, happiness of your employees. And then there's the culture, right? Then what do? We go paintballing, we take a company trip. I walk around and say hi to my employees. I try to call the new employees and say, hello, how are you doing? What's going on? Like we had a guy start last week or month ago. I called him and checked in. We did, a sales call today right before we came here, go down and see your guys, take them out for dinner. We buy a lot of lunches, just little things. Sometimes we have happy hour, just those things that keep the camaraderie, if I don't know you and we're all working in the same company, but I'm forced to say, I like doing this in my pastime. Well, not everybody just comes up and says that.
No.
But if you get to that, if you get that like group vibe going, people start sharing who they are. People start feeling connected because I know that this guy is basically a grill master and that's what he loves, right? Todd is known in our company for, he feels like he has
barbecue.
Barbecue.
Yeah,
like
smoking.
that's his passion.
Yeah.
I don't know, 300 grills, you're like, what are you doing, man?
Wow.
And but when you start learning about that, it starts to make you feel connected to him. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's those basic 5 principles, in my opinion, that's a really big piece to
that's solid
success.
That's a solid, soundbite as well. Like I want to make sure we cut that up and share that because I've never heard it quite explained that way, but I absolutely am going to remember those and take those away. And one thing that I think I'll just be, transparent with what I've struggled with is I know that as we grow, there's going to be a vision there's obviously a vision, but I know that as we grow, there's going to be opportunity to step up the ladder for the team, right? They're going to have upward mobility within their careers because why would I invest this time into them if I didn't believe they had a higher, opportunity? And I think at the very beginning, that's hard. That's hard as hell. At least it was for me. And I don't know about you guys, but in our first year, 2 years in business, like that's been really difficult, is setting that expectation of like, here's the next 4 positions and here's where you have the opportunity to go to and here's what you need to do to get there. I think it's a very simple thing, but it's not easy.
Well, I think that's what, as the owner, I guess, like that's what gets you to work a lot of the time is the fact that you're trying to make sure that they have that upward mobility, right? Mm-hmm. Because we could continue to do the same thing we do, right? But if we do that, nobody can move up, right? We're all just stuck where we are unless Bob dies, right? Like, nobody.
Such a great analogy.
Nobody wants to I hear people like at companies, right? And they're like, I don't know how soon I can move up. Like, all the people that, are above me are kind of young and I don't think they're going to die very soon.
Right. Like my boss is 48 and I just don't know when he's going to retire.
Right. Yeah. So if a company's on a growth pattern though, that's, it's hard to hire somebody and look them in the eye if you're never going to offer them a better opportunity than they have today. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like when you
really hard to hire someone
as an employer, right? Like you want to make sure that you believe in your mission, that they believe in your mission, right? And that they're not just there to do their thing, that they're going to continue to improve themselves within your company, right? So that's why really we want to continue to grow is because we have that obligation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you have an obligation. That's a great way of putting it is you have an obligation to your people to make sure that tomorrow's more exciting than today and that it's going to continue to grow. It's really interesting.
You go ask anybody. I bet you ask Joey Hausman the same thing. I bet he'd say the same thing. Like,
yeah, he could.
He's got more jobs. He's got. It's not about money.
No,
it's about taking care of your employees.
And it's really interesting you say that because I think the title of his episode on Spark to Fire is called "Feed the Beast." I walked up to him during his grand opening. It was the first time I ever met him. Probably the second time.
That's a good.
we gave Marcus chills. Yeah. No, this is the first time. It's probably the second time I ever met him. And I go, so, like, you got this amazing building. And I didn't know him at the time. I know him a lot better now. But I'm just like, you got this amazing building. You got hundreds of employees. You got some of the biggest jobs in Lincoln and the state. What's next? And I don't know why I asked that, but he looked at me and I was like micing him up for his speaking engagement. And he's just like, you gotta feed the beast. And he just walked off and like, that was it. And, in typical, his fashion, like he just on to the next thing. Yeah. And I never forgot that. There's certain moments in your life that you never forget with that. But, I got to ask, so you spend a lot of time on personal development. Who do you guys look up to? Who are some people that you've looked up to as you've grown your business? Is it other businesses that you've seen grow, or is it an individual?
That's a funny question. That's changed, right? Really? Like as I've grown up, right? Because of what you know,
isn't it?
Right.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I first started in the business, I would say that I looked up to like the local roofer, right? Mm-hmm. He just had it made. Everybody was like, yep, call Bob, he's going to be doing my roof.
As long as Bob doesn't die.
Right. Yeah. I thought, man, someday I want to have a business where people are just like, yep, give Dustin a call. He's the guy, And
Bob's a real guy, by the way.
Bob is a real guy. Yes.
Sure he is.
I mean, and then like I would say, maybe a year later, I saw a guy that had like 40 guys working for him, and I was like, "Holy cow! Like I didn't know you could be that big," Yeah. And I mean, I'm talking like labor and everybody, and I'm like, man, someday. Matter of fact, I said it to Bob. I said, Bob, someday I'm going to have 40 guys. He goes, you don't want that kind of headache, And I said, yes, I do.
Yes, I do. I love that. Just pure stubborn, like right from the onset.
Right. You're not my idol anymore, Bob.
Yeah. Next idol.
Yeah. And then, great. I mean, of course, through life, right? Like your what you think is possible changes as you go through life, right? Like,
yeah. You see 1 million, it's easier to get to 5. You see 5, it's easier to get to 10, et cetera.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
I don't know. I was actually thinking about that as you said that. I mean, my original mentor, or probably doesn't know it, but Larry Bass was like my dad's boss, and my dad too was a good mentor for me too. from like being a good, morally sound person, doing what's right. But he was like the entrepreneur guy that, I grew up around, and he was perceived as a super successful person in the community. And he was not perceived, he was. And so I wanted that, and that probably started me down that path. Like to the point where he would support me. He was almost like my uncle. And then from there, I don't know, it started, Dustin was a successful person, and I didn't want it left in the dust. You don't want to be the friend in the dust that's like not cutting it,
Right.
And so I just kept pushing. I don't know who I would say my mentor is though right now. I probably need one. I need to find another one, I don't know. Maybe that's a passion that I need to find, or an area I need to probably grab a hold of.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important moment of just reflection for like listeners that are taking this in. Yeah. You literally are just having this conversation. It's kind of a realization of, oh, I haven't had one in a while, but you have a constant, you're devoted to making yourself better every day. And in your, how long have you been in business now?
Yeah, what are we going close to? 10 years.
10 years, and you're still looking for mentors.
Yeah.
So to anybody that's looking to grow a business, I think that's a really important note to take there, is the fact that you're never going to be too old to like stop needing mentors, because there's somebody that's smarter. There's always gonna be somebody that's smarter than you, more successful, and better at the job that you could be doing or that you're doing today and could be doing tomorrow. So I think that's a really important piece. How do you guys define work-life balance? Is it a thing? My work is my life, so is like for me personally. So I've really blurred those lines, much like my dad does. Like you talked about your dad, I'm like the same way, and I know he listens to these, so I'm sure he'll appreciate the plug. But that's dad, grandpa, they were all like that.
I think that's probably a topic that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, right? For me, I think that we in the company we have a principle saying be where you're at. Okay,
Love that.
so that means if I'm at home, don't be on my phone working on emails or thinking about work. Right, like when you're at home, be there.
Be at home.
When you're at work though, be there. Right, I wouldn't say I'm close to perfect on that, but I think it's a principle that we try to live by. And, I bet you, Marcus's opinion of that is a little different than his wife's, right? Or vice versa. But
Promise.
yeah.
Promise.
What I might say, how good I am about it, might be a little bit different.
Right.
Than
Yeah.
they do, right?
Personal perception of it.
Right. So, I would say that we're maybe most people wouldn't think we're very good about it. But, I mean, Marcus and I call each other at night a lot of times and talk stuff over, right? But, like, we do. I mean, we have our kids and, all that and significant others. And when we're there, we try to make sure we're in the moment, I guess, as well as possible. And we're not perfect. I mean, I call Marcus a lot, and he's like, all right, dude, got to go. Whatever else is going on, right? And we find a time to talk about it later.
I mean, it's family one and family two, right?
Right.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Family one is obviously most important. Like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that my family, my direct family, my wife and my son are taken care of, right? And if that means I got to take a phone call because it's a big relationship, or I walk in here and I'm supposed to be on this spark to fire call and I'm on with one of my biggest customers, like I'm going to take this call right now.
Yeah.
It's not that it's more important. It's just that this is what happened, right? These are the way that it come along. But that's one of my wife's biggest challenges is like, were you with Dustin all day? Yeah, I was. You walked into the house on the phone talking to
with
Dustin.
him.
Don't you guys have offices right next to each other? Yeah, I do. But that doesn't stop the moment, right?
No.
The thought process doesn't stop. So be where you're at is like little cheek and tongue for us, or for me for sure. Like, I'd be playing with my kid in the yard staring at him,
Thinking
watching him,
about
and
business.
laughing at him, and I'm thinking about business.
Yeah.
But I doesn't recognize. I didn't think that was funny or whatever he was doing, but it doesn't stop me. Or hell, my kid might even gave me an idea
Yeah.
because oh, that's a really good idea. Like, you don't even know what you just did, but it gave me an idea.
And I don't think we should, and this is where people, and this was probably a way bigger deal a few years ago, but there was a big movement of like, oh, well, you need to have work-life balance. You need to cut it off and it needs to be at home. I think it's A, it's subjective, and B, I think if you're a business owner, it's going to be subconscious and it's going to be a part of you no matter what. Like, you don't have a choice. I don't know. I can't turn it off. Can you? Like,
No, right? You can decide what you're focusing on, right? But it's always there, right?
That's
It's
true.
passion.
There is somebody, another pretty good friend of ours, Vinny Creekack, State Farm. I happen to be lucky enough to be in a golf outing with him, and him and I were talking about that too, like as CEOs and COOs. Like, how do you separate that self? And he's reading a book, and I can't even quote it. I have to ask him. But one of the higher ups and one of the CEOs says that every 6 weeks, as a person that's running their business needs to take a couple days away to just let their mind like refresh, because you're going through, Landon, you're thinking about all these things and all these movements and all these innovations and all these visions that you want to make happen. Or we come up with so many ideas, and it's just like, dude, no more ideas, okay? Like, nothing's happening,
Right.
And Dustin, what's your statement about, like,
Ideas are expensive.
yeah, ideas are expensive.
That's what I say now.
Or any idea.
You're the visionary, dude.
What did you say? Any idea not, something about any idea not performed is not an idea or something, right? It just stays an idea.
Well, I think they're expensive because you actually execute upon them. If it's just an idea, that's the interesting thing about it is like an idea you're serious about, you're actually going to execute on it. So you're like, shit, we actually have to dump capital in that because we have to do it.
Well, that's true. But so where I was going with that, though, is that the point is that you do need to take a few moments away from your business, let your brain cool down, because it will help spark it again, right? Like, keep it going, keep burning. And if you don't do that, you go into maybe sometimes those moments where you're just like this lull, right? But you want to keep that fire going and you want it to burn hot. And sometimes it's hard to keep that movement.
Yeah. So like when you were talking about your funk that you would get in earlier, like, oh man, I feel like I'm staying in the same place, that sort of thing. So,
Mine's golf. If I like, sometimes I'll tell Dustin, I'm just like, dude, I'm out. I'm burnout. I'm tired. My brain's exhausted. I feel like I'm doing nothing. I'm staring at my computer.
Or I tell them to go golf.
Yeah, I'm
I'm like,
mad.
Marcus, you're done. See
Like,
ya.
I gotta go
you are
golf.
burned, my man.
Yeah,
Get out.
I gotta go start the fire again. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I gotta go relieve, go swing some club,
Yeah.
relax, chill out, drink a couple beers, come back a day later.
Yeah.
Let's start over.
And then you're like,
Yeah, let's start over.
Ready.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's dig in
I
again.
love that. So speaking of, but you mentioned books. So what's a book that's changed your life? And go ahead and start off, Dustin.
I'm gonna probably just go with like one of the first ones, that I can remember reading was actually Zig Ziglar. It was his book. I'm trying to think of the name of it. But the principle that I took away from that book is like that really stayed with me is if you help other people get what they want, you're gonna get what you want, right?
Yeah.
And that's true like all the way through. Like maybe the first time you hear that, it doesn't mean the same thing as it does, the second and the third and the fourth time, right?
I want you to say it again for the listeners. Say it again, what you just said.
The quote?
From Zig Ziglar.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the more people that you help get what they want, the more you're going to get what you want, right? And I'm probably not right dead on the money about that quote, but that's essentially what he says, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at that, I think, well, how does that apply? Well, if I help my customers get what they want, what do they want, right? They want this roof, they want little hassle, they want a fair price, they want great quality, right? If I can make that happen, then they're going to have great things to say about me and they're going to tell somebody else, right? Or if I help an employee, be successful or put them in a position to be successful, other people are going to continue to want to work here, right? Like it's so true, like no matter where you go in your life, right? That if you help somebody else get what they want, you're going to get what you want. You don't need to focus on what you want. I mean, I think that's one of like the worst things you can do in marketing is like focus on you. Focus on them, right? That's what attracts a customer.
Good luck following that one up.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't even have to try because, man, I'm not good with song lyrics, book titles, authors. Like I read something. I'm not a reader. I'm more of a listener.
He likes the audio books.
I like audiobooks.
Pull your phone up. You got your Audible app with you on your phone?
Yeah, I mean, if you go on there, like you're gonna see.
I'm gonna put him on the spot, Dustin.
Like I have like some of Tony Robbins stuff.
Yeah, I love Tony Robbins. That was the first personal development book I ever read was Awaken the Giant Within. By the way, here's your books from Zig Ziglar. Pick out the title, and I'll let our listeners know which one it was.
Oh, this one's actually pretty good. Grant Cardone has some good stuff.
Secrets of Closing the Sale.
So, okay, the book that Dustin was talking about was Secrets of Closing the Sale by Zig Ziglar. And Marcus, you said you have a lot of stuff. Tony Robbins is
Tony Robbins, Grant Cardone. I like economics books. Was my
Freakonomics. Have you read that?
Freakonomics, great book.
They have a podcast too.
Oh yeah, I've heard some of that. I like that. This is Charles Whalen, Naked Economics. Secrets of Selling, Grant Cardone.
Read that.
This one, couldn't even tell you what it was, but I'm sure I got something out of it. It's The Compound Effect.
Read that too.
The Magic of Thinking Big. That's a good one, actually.
Yeah, we got a lot of the same books. The Magic
How to Win by Mark Cuban. That was a pretty good one.
I haven't had that one. No, but The Magic of Thinking Big was one of my favorites. And the fact that he was Nebraska-based was really cool too.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, there was a part where he talks about his stint in Nebraska. And it's one of those that I need to reread because I remember reading it the whole time and I'm like, man, I'm really getting a lot out of this. But then I have to go back and kind of
just look at the cover, man, and I go, oh yeah, that was a good book.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't remember what I grabbed from that book, but I remember, oh yeah, there was stuff in there I liked, But I'm one of those highlight people.
You believe though, so I'm the same way. I can remember titles pretty well, but I'm also the type of person that I believe there's a lot of subconscious value that you don't actually retain actively and you 100%. Can recite. I hope, because I am shit with retention. Outside of that.
Well, the Secrets of Thinking Big, actually, that was one of the things that one of our employees recommended because we started kind of a book club.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People were wanting to improve themselves within the company and somebody brought it and said, okay, let's all read this together. We'd read a chapter, talk about it, once a week. And that was one of the things that, one of them culture things that it wasn't even our idea. It was one of our employees' idea, to do that. And it was awesome. But to touch on what you just said, everything that you let enter your mind, right? Unless you're probably consciously saying, I disagree with that, has an effect on the way that you think, the way you perceive things, right? And I think that's why when you read a book the first time and then maybe you read it later again, it means more to you a lot of times the second time because you've accepted some of the principles behind it and started to relate.
Yeah.
Right? When I probably look at some of the books I've read, I hear something, I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about them, deciding if I agree, disagree, what I think about that, right? But as you go through life after that, you might go, oh, I kind of agree with that because I just saw it happen, right?
Yeah.
And then you hear it again, and you're like, oh yeah, that's true. I've seen it happen, right? You're starting to put things in place that actually happened.
Yeah, one of them actually turned into the start of a core value for us. So the book, I think it's called Brave New Work. It was either Brave New Work or Culture Code. They're both great books, by the way. But from one of those books, I read the term people positive, which is basically saying that you give people the benefit of the doubt to start off and then, trust first. And then if, you get burned, obviously you have to adjust, but leading with trust, being a people positive organization, assuming that people are on their way to doing their best work. They're not actively out to screw you over if you're their boss, you know what I mean? Then that, and if you have a culture problem or a cancer working in your culture, that can be a really tough thing. but it's also a great way to identify if you're constantly feeding positivity into somebody and you're getting shit results back. There's probably a reason for that, right?
Yeah.
And they might be the problem of that organization, but that's a good example of like, I read that book, kind of, a little bit resonated with me, and then I watched it happen.
Yeah.
And that's really when it sunk in, and that's why I was able to even repeat it to you in the first place.
I do like a lot of like internal thinking, right? Like, and I've always come to think that like every single person you meet, you trust them. Just how much, right? Like I trust them like this much,
1%,
or I trust them this much, right? And that's where they talk about like first impressions and everything else, right? Like when you talk about a first impression, it's how much trust do you have in that person, right? And I think trust is important within a business, right? Because if you don't trust anybody in your organization, or you can't trust people in your organization, it slows everything down, right? You got to find workarounds because I don't trust them to touch this or see this or whatever. If you have trust, you have speed.
Yes.
You can move fast.
Trust
when you have
is
it.
speed.
Trust is speed.
Right.
If you get one takeaway from this podcast, guys,
Trust is speed.
Trust is speed. I love that. I think I'm going to wrap this up, but before I do, I want to ask the question of if someone's planning on getting into entrepreneurship today and they want to start their own business, what would be your last piece of advice for them if they want to make that, or they want to make that jump? Say they're in corporate America working for somewhere, or they're working for a contractor at this time, but they want to get out and start. What would you tell them?
Want me to go or?
Go ahead.
Persistence. I can't remember what president says this, but persistence is omnipotent. That's number one. And number two, process. That's so crucial. That's what's allowed us to scale.
Yeah. I was actually going to say something along the lines of process, right? Like until you have process, you can't grow, right? Like otherwise you have different people doing different things, and it prevents you from scaling. But I also think that, high levels of action are like really, really important at the beginning.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it at the beginning, probably. Just go do it. It might be an education. But
you're going to break stuff. You might as well just keep moving.
Be a doer, not a thinker at first, right? Like not telling you to be a retard, right? But like, just don't be afraid to get educated. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't, nobody wants to, nobody intends to, but like, I guess what somebody said, like, you don't really fail till you quit, right? Like Thomas Edison make the light bulb, right? He failed 200 times, but did he really fail, or did he?
1,000, wasn't it?
Maybe 1,000, right?
It was a lot.
You guys are the book readers.
So he didn't fail. It was just like an experiment that didn't work, right? Mm-hmm. Like, oh, that didn't work. It was the process of getting towards success, and you got to think of that as the same thing in business, right?
The harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
You read the book yet?
Mm-mm.
That's Joe Rickett's book title, the founder of TD Ameritrade. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll read that.
Yeah, no, I'm going to be reading it here soon too, but we just got done interviewing not too long ago Alfred Levitt and Kurt Havelson, which were the two of the people that work with Mr. Rickett's portfolio.
A lot of people forget that the do mentality. I think you and I both had that.
The what mentality?
The do mentality.
Right.
Like, just go do it, man.
Ideas are worthless, right?
Yeah.
They're not worth anything. We've all got them.
Yep.
I mean, hell, I thought of the heated toilet seat a long time ago, but did I do anything with it? No. Somebody else did. Now I've got one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's awesome. Now I've got one. Is that what you said? That's awesome. I don't know if we could end on anything better than a heated toilet seat. That's excellent. No, guys, this has been really, it's been really easy to talk to you. Like, I feel like this conversation just like flew by, and it was really easy to just get into the throes of what it was like building this. And we didn't really talk about like the current success of Apple Roofing, but you guys have just blown up. I mean, you have how many employees now?
Around 60.
Around 60 employees. So you went from a few man crew working really hard for, like that 3-day stint, right? With how many people did you have at that time when you were working?
Well, we started with 3 of us. There was Marcus, myself, and Brian Kincaid.
Yeah, Brian Kincaid.
Yep.
And from that to thinking, you know what, someday I'm going to have a 40-person crew, to having over 60 people. And I think that if you take one thing away from this podcast today, is that your vision is going to stretch over time, and that process is going to lead to success. I've learned that from you guys just by working with you, watching how coordinated everything is. And I think that that's a big reason you guys are consistently, you have the consistency. You're giving that customer the same experience every single time, and you know what is going to move the needle a little bit further into the green. So thank you for coming on today and spending some time just chatting with me. I really enjoyed this, and I'm sure we're going to have you back on again when you double and triple and quadruple the company. So
Let's do it.
yeah.
Thanks, Landon.
Guys, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Spark to Fire. As usual, you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube at Spark to Fire Podcast, and on social media at Spark to Fire Podcast. I'm your host, Landon Rhodes, and as usual, keep striking.